Alabama folk singer is dead after she was attacked by a pair of coyotes.
What is the monkey doing? Tell me what the monkey...
He hit your face off!
We actually have a trainer in the water with one of our whales.
If I show weakness, if I retreat, I may be hurt, I may be killed.
Baby Azaria Chamberlain was taken by a dingo back in 1980.
So what's the deal? Like, I'm gone for 2 weeks and society just starts shutting down? So we're just shooting CEOs in the back of the head now? That's the plan? I mean, don't threaten me with a good time. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Man Eaters, the only true crime podcast on the internet where all the killers are real animals, whether it's bitings, scratchings, maulings, or clawings. We're here to talk about it. As always, I'm your host, Jimothy, and it's been a couple of weeks since we've had a new episode. My deepest apologies. Life kind of got away from me. In fact, you could say I've had the worst week of my fucking life. That might be a bit of an overreaction, but it hasn't been a great time to be me in my head. My grandfather passed away fairly suddenly, and that obviously wasn't good. I mean, he was like 93, so he died of being 93, but it was still very sad, and a lot of work stuff happening in my life right now, and I've not been having a good time. So I did take a couple of weeks off. Sorry about that. But thank you to the really nice messages from a few of you when I posted there wouldn't be a new episode. I was that was very touching. Thank you. People saying, you don't owe us jack. Look after yourself, Jimothy. And I really appreciate that. So thank you so much. But I am back with a new episode. I couldn't wait. Today we're talking about a really interesting story, the story of the Essex and the white whale that took it down. You've all heard of Moby Dick, and this is the story that inspired that classic novel. So we're going to talk about that. Before we do, I want to talk about one email that I got this week from, I'm going to give you a fake name because I don't want to, I want to preserve your anonymity. So we're going to call this guy Paul. Paul writes, Paul sent me an email a couple of days ago. The headline was "A Few Things to Discuss," and I was immediately like, "Oh God, what have I done now? Who's angry at me?" But Paul brings up pretty good observation, or basically. How about I'll just read. I won't read the whole thing to you, but I'll read bits and pieces. So, Paul writes, "Good morning. Let me just start by saying that I love your podcast. I find it extremely interesting. I haven't had the chance to listen to every episode yet, but I will." Lovely start. Great start, Paul. But he does say, "So I would like to discuss something. In several episodes, hunters are mentioned. In the first episode, you referenced dickhead hunters. Originally, I was offended, but I got over it. I'm not that sensitive." Good on you, Paul. "I am a hunter, and I am a very avid outdoorsman. I'm curious if you've had the opportunity to spend much time outdoors. I assume, I could be wrong, that you have not spent much time in the wild." I've spent a fair amount of time in the outdoors. I'd say more than the average white man. I like go camping as frequently as I could. When I was growing up, I was an Air Force cadet, so many times we do like survival bivouacs and stuff like that. But I wouldn't say that I've spent a lot of time in the wilderness, as Paul obviously has. So then Paul says, I'm not going to name the exact place because I don't want to out this person as to where they live. He says, "I'd like to extend you an invitation. Come to Alaska. That's where I currently live. I'd like to take you on a hunting trip." I'll be honest, Paul, this at the moment it's starting to sound a bit like a trap. "I'd like the opportunity to give you a different perspective. Without hunting, the human species would not exist. If you've never been exposed to the outdoor lifestyle, this would give you the chance to learn a lot." Let me just go back and address, I think that the key issue with the email was that I think I must have referred to hunters broadly as dickheads in an early episode, because I don't remember saying this recently. And I assume this is early on in the podcast, like 2021, 2022. And my views, perhaps I wasn't clear so either one of two things. Either my opinion has changed and I haven't noticed it, or the first time I did this and I called hunters dickheads, I wasn't clear in what I was actually meaning. So let me just clarify what my position is, and hopefully that clears something up. So if I did refer to hunters as dickheads, and again I don't remember doing that, but I'm going to take your word that I did because it's recorded, and you can definitely prove to me that I did if I did. If I refer to hunters as dickheads, that's probably not correct. What I probably am really referring to is like trophy hunters, or like big game hunters, or poachers particularly. What I'm not referring to is like you going out on the weekend and shooting a deer and then getting the deer processed and butchered and feeding your family with a deer. Like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like that guy the fucking dentist who shot the lion. He's a dickhead. Or those hunters who, I guess poacher is probably a better term for them, but those people who like, cut rhinoceros horns off because they think that in China it'll give you a big dick. Like that's who I'm referring to as the dickhead. No, like hunters in general, I think are actually quite good, conservationists. I'm not a vegetarian. I was, but I'm not now. But it would be very hypocritical of me to eat meat that you buy in the grocery store, and then turn around and say, "Oh, but I don't like that you shoot animals." Because like in a lot of ways, hunting is far more ethical. And a lot of vegans, like I know a lot of vegans believe the same thing. They're like, don't go buy meat from the grocery store. But like, man, if you live on a property and you shoot a deer and kill it and feed your family with that deer, that is far more ethical than like, getting the meat that comes from the awful slaughterhouses and abattoirs. So that, I guess, Paul, what I'm saying is I don't think you are a dickhead. And I think I probably should have been really clear with that at the outset back when I started the show and whenever I've said this. So no, as for your invitation to go to Alaska, a couple reasons why I'm not going to be able to accept that. One, I'm incredibly poor and I cannot afford a flight to Alaska. I live in Australia. I live in New South Wales in Australia. That to Alaska, that's like a 13-hour flight at least. That's a big trip, I'm pretty sure, to get to Alaska. And I cannot afford that. I do appreciate you. Like, I won't read this part here, but Paul has offered me to stay at his home, and he's actually given me his phone number, and said that if he's given me the phone number and said if I don't answer, leave a message. There's a lot of areas in Alaska that does not have good phone reception. Listen, man, I love that you've sent that invitation out to me. I respectfully will decline the invitation because, one, I have no means to get there, financially or just like time-wise. I don't have time to go to Alaska. And two, as much as I respect you, this does still slightly feel like a bit of a trap. I generally, as a rule for my own safety, do not accept the invitation to head into the wilderness of Alaska with a stranger who has access to firearms. If you were going to plan to murder me, this would be the way to do it. But no, thank you. And I will read one more thing that he said. He said, as for hunters being dickheads, sometimes I do agree with you. There are good and bad in every culture. I despise poachers. I also do not approve of killing an animal just for a trophy. But the huge majority of hunters are hunting for food. I know a lot of people will say you can go to the store and buy food. I've seen the inside of a chicken house and a beef processing plant. They are disgusting. I prefer to get my food from nature. Dude, we are in absolute total agreement there, 100%. I don't have a problem with hunting for food or sustenance. I just don't like trophy killing and I don't like poaching. And those are my two bugaboos. But everything else is cool. So, Paul, thank you for your email. And I really appreciate the invitation to come and hunt with you in Alaska. And maybe one time, if I'm in North America, I might give you a call and accept that. But only if I can bring a friend who is recording 100% of the time. Because again, I think this in some small way does still make me think you're trying to kill me. Okay, thank you to Paul for that email. And I will reply to your email before this episode goes out so that you know I'm going to give you a shout out. But you're a legend and I really appreciate the kind words. He said a little bit at the end there about the show and he likes the show. I'm not going to read that out because it feels a little bit self-aggrandizing. But thank you, Paul. I do very much appreciate that. Wow, I've already yacked away for 10 minutes. We need to get into the meat of this story. We're talking today about the Essex and the white whale that sunk it. Again, this is the story that inspired Moby Dick, which is one of the most classic stories in Western literature. I've been waiting for a long time to tell you about this story. There's a lot in here. We're going to try to fit it into one episode. So let's just get into it, guys. We're heading back out to sea, and here we go. The tragic tale of the Essex. The Essex was an American whaling ship from Nantucket, Massachusetts, and it was launched in 1799. On November 20th, 1820, while at sea in the Southern Pacific Ocean under the command of Captain George Pollard Jr., the ship was attacked and sunk by a massive sperm whale. About 2,000 nautical miles, or 3,700 kilometers from the coast of South America, the 20-man crew was forced to make for land in 3 whaleboats with whatever food and water they could scavenge from the wreck. After a month at sea, the crew landed on the uninhabited Henderson Island. 3 men elected to stay on the island, from which they were rescued in April of 1821, while the remaining 17 set off again for the coast of South America. The men suffered severe dehydration, starvation, and exposure on the open ocean, and the survivors eventually resorted to cannibalism. By the time they were rescued in February of 1821, 3 months after the sinking of the Essex, only 5 of the 17 men were left alive. First mate Owen Chase and cabin boy Thomas Nickerson later wrote accounts of the ordeal. The tragedy attracted international attention and inspired Herman Melville to write his 1851 novel, Moby Dick. When Essex departed from Nantucket, Massachusetts on her fateful voyage in August of 1819, she was considered to be a lucky vessel, as her previous 6 whaling expeditions had brought in good profits. She was only 20 years old and had been refitted during the summer. At only 37 meters in length and weighing about 239 tons, the Essex was small for a whaling ship. She was equipped with 5 whaleboats, each about 25 feet or 8.5 meters in length. Essex set sail with a crew of 21 men. 12, including the officers and 2 of the 3 boat steerers, were born and raised in Nantucket, while 9 were off-islanders, of whom several were black. The captain, 29-year-old George Pollard Jr., had sailed as second mate of Essex in 1815 to 1816 and as first mate in 1817 through to 1819. The first mate, 21-year-old Owen Chase, had sailed on Essex in 1817 through to 1819. The second mate was 26-year-old Matthew Joy. The 3 boat steerers were Obed Hendricks and Benjamin Lawrence, both 20 years old and from Nantucket, and Englishman Thomas Chappell. At the age of 14, cabin boy Thomas Nickerson was the youngest member of the crew, while at least 5 more were under the age of 20. The ages of most of the black crew members is not known. Essex departed from Nantucket on August 12, 1819, on what was expected to be a roughly 2.5-year voyage to the whaling grounds off the west coast of South Africa. The route towards Cape Horn was an indirect one, dictated by the prevailing winds of the Atlantic Ocean. First, the ship would sail with the westerlies towards Europe and Africa, and then back towards South America with the northeast trade winds. There were scheduled stops at the Azores and the Cape Verde Islands, where the ship would be stocked with provisions more cheaply than in Nantucket. A few days into the voyage, Essex was hit by a sudden squall in the Gulf Stream. She was knocked on her beam ends and nearly sank. Damages included the loss of her top-gallant sail and 2 whaleboats, with an additional whaleboat sustaining minor damage. Pollard's initial thought was to return to Nantucket for repairs, but he accepted the arguments of Chase and Joy, the first and second mates, who wished to continue to the Azores. At the Cape Verde Islands, the crew were able to purchase a whaleboat. Later, as Essex sailed down the east coast of South America 3 months into the voyage, the first sperm whale was killed. So let's take a little moment now to take a break and talk about sperm whales and why these were such prized kills for whaling boats. So, At this time, the sperm whale was a relatively recently discovered animal. Before this, other whales were hunted, including the right whale. And the right whale was literally named the right whale because it was, hey, that's the right whale to hunt. Eventually, the sperm whale was discovered. Now, the reason it wasn't known before this time is because the sperm whale is a deep water whale. They live incredibly deep in the ocean. And they're very well known because they get into lots of scraps with giant squids. In fact, oftentimes you'll find in the stomach of sperm whales the beaks of giant squids, which are the only part of their body that can't be digested. Their bodies are often also covered with lots of scars from fights that they get into with the giant squids. So the scars are like the suckers that are on the tentacles. I did a book report on sperm whales when I was in year 3, and I still remember a lot about it, although I can't remember the exact level of the ocean. I think they live in the twilight zone, but I can't remember. My best friend Mason also had to do a book report on an ocean animal, and it was the giant squid. And I still remember this. This really annoys me. Me and him worked together on this, and part of the thing was on the back wall of the classroom, they did like this big mural, and we had to we had to draw and paint our animals to scale and place them in the ocean where they were supposed to go. And we discovered that sperm whales and giant squids often fought and clashed, and we thought that was the coolest thing ever. So when we were laying down our artworks to be put up on the wall, we arranged ours so that my sperm whale had the tentacles of the giant squid around it, and it looked really cool, and we placed that down. And I knew that the teacher would be like, ugh, what are they doing? And I went up to the teacher and said, hey, this isn't an accident, okay? We did this because they fight each other, and we think it would be really cool to go up on the wall like that. And so then the next day we came in, guess what? They were fucking miles apart. That teacher was a bitch and I hate her. But anyway, that's why I am so interested in sperm whales. The other thing about the sperm whale and why they were so prized, it's the name, sperm whale. Now, when you're a kid, you go, hee 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 hee, sperm. Why are they named sperm whales? And the teacher will give you some answer that's wrong. You're sitting there thinking, surely they're not named after cum. My friends, sperm whales are indeed named after cum. So, if you crack open a sperm whale's brain, head, skull, if you crack open their skull, which I do not recommend you do, you will find this very weird jelly-like substance around their brain called spermaceti, and that's where the name comes from. And yeah, it looks like semen. That's literally why it's called that. It's called spermaceti because it looks like sperms. This stuff was great for being a lubricant. Not in that way, you sick freaks. In the Industrial Revolution, which was currently happening, they needed lots of lubricant for the machines, and the spermaceti was fantastic. They also discovered that the fat from the whale was great for candles because for some reason it burned cleaner, it burned slower, it burned brighter, and it also didn't leave like a gross like waxy residue over the rest of the room. Or it did, but not as much as like other fats from other animals did. So the sperm whale was highly sought after. The other reason as well is that they're massive, they're huge. Sperm whales are the largest of the toothed animals in the world, which makes it the largest predator on Earth. And I believe it would make it the largest predator that has ever existed on Earth. We know that the blue whale is the biggest whale. Sperm whales are like a couple rungs down. I think there's like 2 or 3 whales between sperm whales and blue whales, but they are incredibly huge. And obviously that means there's a lot of meat on them, there's a lot of fat on them, there's a lot of blubber on them, and there's a lot of spermaceti as well. So incredibly sought after whales, and they basically, once they were discovered, it revolutionized the whaling game. The ships were changed. Essentially what they used to do is they would just harpoon a whale and drag it back into shore. These whales were so big that they couldn't do that. It would take too long to drag them back to the shore, so they would retrofit all the ships so that essentially you would drag the whale onto the ship, and the ship became like a giant meat factory. You would be processing and butchering the whale on the ship, storing all the fat and the blubber and the meat and the spermaceti into barrels, and then chucking the carcass off. And the ships would just go around for up to like a few years at a time, hunting as many whales as they could, filling up their cargo holds with these barrels full of meat and blubber and fat. And that's basically what the whaling game became. It was huge. So that's what the Essex was doing. They were hunting sperm whales. And that would also be their fate as well. A sperm whale would also be the end of the Essex. So, in the face of strong winds from the west, the Essex took over a month to round Cape Horn into the whaling grounds of the South Pacific. In January 1820, she met up with other whalers from Nantucket at St. Mary's Island off the coast of West Chile. After several months of searching for whales off the coast of Chile, Essex sailed north and met more success off the coast of Peru. Within 2 months, they had killed enough whales to produce 450 barrels of oil. In May of 1820, Essex hailed the Aurora, another whaler from Nantucket, whose captain told them that another whaling ground known as the Offshore Ground had been discovered more than 1,000 miles off the Peruvian coast. Pollard decided that after making provisional stops, he would set sail for these new grounds rather than stay in the depleted coastal grounds that they were currently in. In September of 1820, the Essex sailed to the Peruvian port town of Atacames, which is now part of Ecuador. It was here that Henry DeWitt jumped ship, leaving the Essex with only a crew of 20. When whales were spotted, the 3 whaleboats, each with an officer, a boat steerer, and 4 crew members, would go in pursuit. Without DeWitt, however, there would only be 2 crew members left aboard the Essex, which was not enough to safely handle a ship of the Essex's size and type. To restock their food supplies for the long journey, Essex sailed to Charles Island, which was later renamed as Florina Island in the Galapagos Islands. The crew needed to fix a serious leak and initially anchored off Hood Island, which is now known as Espanola Island, on October 8th, 1820. During a week at anchor, they captured 300 Galapagos giant tortoises to supplement the ship's food stores. They erroneously believed that, and I don't know why they thought this, they thought that tortoises were immortal and they didn't need to, well, not immortal, they thought that tortoises didn't need to eat or drink water to survive. So they just thought that if we just keep these animals on the ship, that's our food supply taken care of for like seemingly forever. These tortoises weigh between 100 and 800 pounds, and they were captured alive, and some of them were actually allowed to roam the ship at will, while the rest of them were kept in the hold. It was pretty cool. I mean, I think that'd be pretty fun to just be on a big whaling ship and you have this just fucking Galapagos tortoises walking around. I'd make it a pet and be really sad when they had to eat them. And they would also drink their blood, which is not necessarily good for you. So, after picking up all the tortoises, and while hunting on Charles Island, Chappell lit a fire as a prank, just as a funny little goof. But unknown to him, it was the height of the dry season, and the fire quickly burned out of control, surrounding the hunters and forcing them to run through the flames to escape. By the time the men returned to the Essex, most of the entire island was burning, and Pollard swore vengeance on whoever had set it. I don't think that Chappell ever admitted to it. The next day, the island was still burning as the ship sailed for offshore grounds. Even after a full day of sailing, the fire was still visible on the horizon. Chappell would only admit that he had set the fire much later after the Essex sank. Many years later, Nickerson returned to Charles Island and found a blackened wasteland. He observed that neither trees, shrubbery, nor grass have appeared since. So not a great prank from Chappell there. When the Essex reached the hunting grounds about 1,000 miles west of the Galapagos Islands, whales still proved elusive. When they finally found a whale on November 16, 1820, it surfaced directly beneath Chase's boat. No one was injured, but to Chase's dismay, the boat required repairs. At 8 o'clock in the morning on November 20th, 1820, the lookout sighted spouts of water, and the 3 remaining whaleboats set out to pursue a pod of sperm whales. On the leeward side of the Essex, Chase's whaleboat harpooned a whale, but its tail struck the boat and opened up a seam, forcing the crew to cut the harpoon line and return to the Essex for repairs. 2 miles away off the windward side, Pollard and Joy's boat each harpooned a whale and were dragged towards the horizon away from the Essex. Chase was repairing the damaged whaleboat on board the Essex when the crew sighted an unusually large sperm whale, reportedly around 85 feet or 26 meters in length, and it was reportedly acting quite strangely. It lay motionless on the surface, facing the ship, and then began to swim towards the vessel, picking up speed by the shallow diving. The whale rammed the Essex, rocking her from side to side, and then it dove underneath her, surfacing close on the ship's starboard side. As its head lay along the bow and the tail by the stern, it was motionless and appeared to be stunned. Chase prepared to harpoon it from the deck when he realized that its tail was only inches from the rudder. which the whale could easily destroy if provoked by an attempt to kill it. Fearing to leave the ship stuck thousands of miles from land with no rudder to steer it, Chase hesitated. The whale recovered, swam hundreds of yards forwards of the ship, and then turned to face the ship's bow. I turned around and saw him about 150 rods directly ahead of us, coming down twice its ordinary speed of around 24 knots, and it appeared with tenfold fury and vengeance in its aspect. The surf flew in all directions around him, with the continual violent thrashing of its head. His head about half out of the water, and in that way he came upon us and again struck the ship. That was the way that Owen Chase described the attack. The whale crushed the bow, driving the vessel backwards, and then finally disengaged its head from the shattered timbers and swam off, leaving the Essex quickly going down by the bow. Chase and the remaining sailors retrieved the spare whaleboat, while on the steward, William Bond, ran below to gather the captain's chest and whatever navigational aids he could find. The whaleboats of Pollard and Joy were about 2 miles from the Essex when one of the boat steerers looked back and saw the ship falling on her beam ends. The 2 boats hurriedly released their whales and rowed back to the Essex. Yard, the captain's boat was the first that reached us. He stopped about a boat's length off, but had no power to utter a single syllable. He was so completely overpowered with the spectacle before him. He was in short time, however, enabled to address the inquiry to me. My God, Mr. Chase, what is the matter? I answered, we have been stove by a whale. Yar! I don't think they said yar back then, like they're not pirates, but I think it's funner to do that, so I'm going to keep saying yar. Now, the cause of this whale's aggression is not actually known. In The Heart of the Sea, author Nathaniel Philbrick speculated that it may have first struck the boat accidentally, or have had its curiosity aroused by the sound of a hammer as the damaged whaleboat was being repaired. The frequency and sound of the nailing may have sounded similar to those made by bull sperm whales to communicate and echolocate. The crew spent the next 2 days salvaging what supplies remained from the waterlogged wreck of the Essex. 3 whaleboats were rigged with makeshift masts and sails were taken from the Essex, and boards were added to heighten the gunwales and prevent large waves from spilling over the sides. Inside Pollard's sea chest, which Bond's quick thinking had managed to save, were 2 sets of navigational equipment and 2 copies of maritime charts. These were split between Pollard's and Chase's boats. Joy's boat was left without any means of navigation except to keep within sight of the other boats. Essex sank approximately 2,000 nautical miles west of South America. The officers debated which route to take towards land. Pollard favoured sailing west with the prevailing winds and current. The nearest islands to the west were the Marquesas Islands, which were about 1,200 miles away, but Pollard was afraid they would encounter cannibals there and concluded that it would be safer to sail to the Society Islands about 2,000 miles away. Chase and Joy disagreed, fearing that the Society Islands might be cannibals, and suggested sailing south for about 1,500 miles, and then picking up a band of variable winds to take them off the coast of Chile or Peru, all the time hoping to come across another whale ship. In fact, both the Marquesas and Society Islands would have been safe destinations, as the inhabitants at that time were friendly towards mariners, but Pollard accepted the suggestions of Chase and Joy. Herman Melville later speculated that the crew would all have survived if they had followed Pollard's recommendation and sailed towards the Society Islands, writing, all the suffering these miserable men of the Essex might, in all human probability, have been avoided if they had immediately after the wreck steered straight for Tahiti, from which they were not very distant at the time, but they dreaded cannibals. Yeah, I'll be honest, growing up, as a child, I thought cannibals were going to be more of an issue in real life. Turns out, not a lot of people are cannibals. Turns out, it's not good for you, and most people don't do it. The crew were divided between the 3 boats, under the command of Pollard, Chase, and Joy, and on November 22nd, 1820, they set off for land. Never designed for long voyages, all of the whaleboats had been very roughly repaired, and leaks were a constant and serious problem during the voyage. After losing a timber, the crew of one boat had to lean to one side to raise the other side out of the water until another boat was able to draw close, allowing a sailor to nail a piece of wood over the hole. Storms and rough seas were frequently plaguing the tiny whaleboats, and the men who were not occupied with steering and trimming the sails spent most of their time bailing water from the bilge. Food and water were rationed from the beginning, with the men first consuming the bread that had been soaked in seawater, even though it increased their thirst. After 10 days of eating only meager rations of bread, they slaughtered the first of the giant tortoises that had been salvaged from the wreck and achieved quite a small respite from hunger. On December 20th, exactly 1 month after the whale attack, with the men suffering from severe starvation, dehydration, and exposure, the boats landed on the uninhabited Henderson Island, a small, uplifted coral atoll within the modern-day British territory of the Pitcairn Islands. The men incorrectly believed that they had landed on the Duchy Islands, a similar atoll about 220 miles to the east. Had they landed on Pitcairn itself, around 120 miles to the southwest, they might have received help. The descendants of the HMAS Bounty, which had famously mutinied in 1789, still lived there. On Henderson Island, the Essex's crew found food in the form of birds, crabs, fish, eggs, and peppergrass, but water proved more difficult to find, although they eventually came across a freshwater spring below the tide line. In fact, in terms of the birds, they found a species of bird there similar to kind of like dodos, and these birds had never seen humans before, so they didn't have a fear of humans, and within like 6 days, the crew had hunted these birds to extinction, and there were no more left on the island. So just after 1 week, they had largely exhausted the island's food resources. On December 26th, they concluded that they would all starve to death if they remained much longer. As most of the crew prepared to set sail in the whaleboats once again, 3 men, William Wright, Seth Weeks, and Thomas Chappell, the only white member of the crew who were not natives to Nantucket, opted to stay behind on the island. Pollard promised, if he made it back to South America, to see that they were rescued. Pollard was true to his word, and the 3 men on Henderson Island were rescued by Surrey, an Australian trading vessel, in April 1821. Australia was mentioned, woohoo! The remaining Essex crewmen, now numbering 17 in 3 whaleboats, resumed their journey on December 27th, 2 days after Christmas, with the intention of reaching Easter Island. On January 4th, 1821, they estimated that they had drifted too far south of Easter Island and decided to make for Mas Afura Island off the coast of Chile. On the same day, they exhausted their supply of fish and birds from Henderson Island and were back to daily rations of a cup of water and 3 ounces of bread. On January 10th, Joy, who had been in poor health even before Essex left Nantucket, he died, and his body was consigned to the sea. Pollard's boat steerer, Obed Hendricks, took over command of Joy's boat. The following day, Chase's boat became separated from the others during a squall. On January 20th, Richard Peterson died on Chase's boat, and his body too was buried at sea. On the same day, more than 100 miles to the north, Lawson Thomas died on Hendricks's boat. By this time, the provisions on Pollard's and Hendricks's boat had already run out, and they had made the grim decision to eat his body. 2 days later, Charles Shorter died and was eaten. Within a few days, Isaiah Shepherd and Samuel Reed suffered a similar fate. On the night of January 29th, the boats of Pollard and Hendricks became separated. Hendricks's boat lacked any navigational equipment, and he and his 2 remaining crew members, William Bond and Joseph West, were never seen again. Months later, a whaleboat with 4 skeletons in it was found washed up on Duchy Island, and it was suggested that this boat was Hendricks's. By February 6th, the crew of Pollard's boat was again starving. It was decided to draw lots, and Owen Coffin was shot and eaten. 5 days later, Barzilia Ray died and was eaten by Pollard and Charles Ramsdell. Meanwhile, the men in Chase's boat had resorted to cannibalism when Isaac Cole died on February 10th. "I have no language, yar, to paint the anguish, yar, of our souls in this dreadful, yar, dilemma, yar," Chase later recounted in his memoirs, Sans Yars. On the morning of February 18th, Lawrence, who was steering Chase's boat, spotted a sail a few miles distant. They managed to catch up to the vessel, which turned out to be the British ship the Indian. Too weak to climb aboard, Chase, Lawrence, and Nickerson had to be lifted from their boat and carried to the captain's cabin. Later that day, they came within sight of Marsafura, the islands towards Chase had, with remarkable accuracy, been navigating. A few days later, the Indian sailed into the port Valparaiso. The whaleboat, which was being towed behind the Indian, was lost in a gale. On February 23rd, 93 days after the sinking of the Essex, Pollard and Ramsdell were spotted by the Nantucket whale ship Dolphin near St. Mary's Island off the coast of Chile, where Essex had stopped over a year before. Pollard and Ramsdell were close to starvation, sucking on the bones of their dead shipmates and drifting in and out of consciousness when they were taken aboard the Dolphin. They were then transferred to another Nantucket whale ship called the Two Brothers, which was sailing for Valparaiso. On March 17th, they reached the port and were reunited with Chase, Lawrence, and Nickerson, who had been recovering on the frigate USS Constellation under the care of the ship's surgeon. All whaleboat survivors were Nantucketeers. On March 23rd, Chase, Lawrence, Nickerson, and Ramsdell set off for Nantucket in the whale ship the Eagle. Pollard was still too weak to make the journey and followed them aboard the Two Brothers in May. The commander of Constellation arranged the rescue of the three seamen who had stayed on what they thought was Duchy Island, but was actually Henderson Island. He asked the captain of an Australian trading vessel, the Surrey, which was returning to Australia, to stop at Duchy and pick up the survivors. When they found Duchy Island uninhabited, the captain of the Surrey wondered if the officers of the Essex had confused Duchy and Henderson Island and decided to sail onto the Henderson Islands, where they found Chapel, Weeks, and Wright on the 9th of April. It's likely if the Australian captain hadn't made the decision to double-check Henderson Island, that those three would not have survived much longer. Pollard returned to the sea in early 1822 to captain the Two Brothers. She was wrecked on the French frigate Shoals to the northwest of the Sandwich Islands during Pollard's first voyage as a captain. This guy is bad luck. The crew, which included Nickerson and Ramsdell, took two whaleboats which were picked up the following day by the whale ship the Martha, who had been sailing with them. This wreck was to end Pollard's whaling career, and he was considered a doomed captain, or a Jonah, whom no whale ship owner would ever again trust with a vessel. After one voyage aboard a merchant vessel, he retired from the sea and became a night watchman in Nantucket. Every year, on November 20th, the anniversary of the sinking of the Essex, he would lock himself in his room and observe a fast. He died in Nantucket on January 7th, 1870, at the age of 78. Chase returned to Nantucket on June 11th, 1821, to find that he had a 14-month-old daughter who he had never met. 4 months later, he had completed an account of the disaster called The Narrative of the Most Extraordinary and Distressing Shipwreck of the Whale Ship Essex. Could have used a workshop on the title there. It's a bit wordy. Herman Melville used this book as one of the inspirations for his 1851 novel Moby Dick. Chase then sailed as first mate on the whale ship Florida, or Florida, I guess. I don't know why I pronounced it Florida, and returned to Nantucket in 1823. His wife died after the birth of their third child, and he married the widow of former Essex mate Matthew Joy. He then captained the New Bedford whale ship Winslow and the Nantucket whale ship Charles Carroll, in which he owned a share. Chase again married after the death of his second wife. This guy's very unlucky as well, only to divorce his third wife when he found out she had given birth 16 months after he had last seen her, although he subsequently brought up the child as his own. Okay, this guy's kind of chill like that. I like that. In September of 1840, 2 months after the divorce was finalized, he married for the fourth and final time and retired from whaling. Chase died in Nantucket on March 7th, 1869 at the age of 73. Lawrence captained the whale ships Dromo and Huron before retiring and buying a small farm at Sisconet in Nantucket. He died in Nantucket on March 28th, 1879 at the age of 80. Ramsdell captained the whale ship General Jackson. He died in Nantucket on July 8th, 1866 at the age of 62. Nickerson became a captain in the merchant services and moved to Brooklyn in New York. Later in his life, he returned to Nantucket where he ran a boarding house for summer visitors and wrote an account of the sinking, titled The Loss of the Ship Essex Sunk by a Whale and the Ordeal of the Crew in Open Boats. Again, could use a shorter title. Something like The Ordeal of the Whale, or something like that, I don't know. Nickerson wrote this account 56 years after the sinking, and in 1876, and it was lost in let me say that again. He wrote this account 56 years after the sinking in 1876, and it was lost until 1960. The Nantucket Historical Association published it in 1984. He died in February of 1883, aged 77. 3 men, Chappell, Weeks and Wright, who had been rescued from Henderson Island, continued to work as crew members of their rescue ship, the Surrey, before making their way back to England and then the United States. Chappell retired from sailing and became a missionary, but he died of a plague fever in Timor. Wright was lost at sea in a hurricane in the West Indies. Weeks retired to Cape Cod, where he died on September 12, 1887, having outlived the rest of the Essex survivors. Now, I have been extremely broad in the storytelling here. There is so much to go into in terms of the ordeal that the men went through on the boats and on the island. It is a massive story. It's one of the worst maritime disasters in history. And you know that it had to be good because Moby Dick is based on it. It is not normal for a sperm whale to be that aggressive, and it's unknown exactly why it was aggressive. Like there are some theories. One of the theories that isn't really mentioned in that story is that hey, they were killing all the other whales around it, and maybe that annoyed that big whale. I don't know. It also could have been confused by the banging of the hammer and nail on the boat as they were trying to repair it, because apparently the same frequency and sound kind of sounds like whales wanting to fuck. So I think that maybe it was just like a horny big whale that caused a lot of damage and a lot of misery. So an incredible story there. And we got to talk about cannibalism again. Yay, excellent. That was the story of the Essex and the white whale. We're going to take a little bit of a break now, and we'll be back with the rest of our episode. Go and do a wee. Yar. And we're back. Apologies, guys, if you've noticed I sound a bit sick. I got a cold. Like, as a lot of you know, I work with young people, children, and we did a showcase last week, and there were like hundreds of kids involved. And man, if you guys have children, you know this, but kids just get you sick. They're like little pathogen carriers. It's awful. So I feel fine, but my voice still sounds kind of fucked. So that's where I'm at. All right, time to move on to the next segment of the show, which is, of course, the Scratch of the Day. Scratch of the Day, the segment of the show where we look at animal attacks in the news and we read all about them. And it's been a couple of weeks, so there's a nice stockpile of animal attack stories. I've got 3 here for you, very unique stories. First one is about a woman who was bitten, or stung, I guess is the right word. Ow, I just banged my elbow. Did you hear that? Stung by a blue ring octopus. I'm going to link in this news article because I don't know why there's so much going on in this page. Like, it's not just a news article. There's like graphics, there's videos. It's beautiful. It's really well done. I'm going to read bits and pieces of this because it is quite a long story. But here we go. The headline reads, how surviving a deadly animal encounter is not the only end of a trauma. Paz Marino was thankful to survive after being bitten by a venomous blue-ringed octopus, but the victim blaming that followed compounded her mental anguish. It's a phenomenon that other animal attack survivors know all too well. This is written by Angela Heathcote for ABC News, and it was published on Thursday, the 28th of November. Paz Marino hesitantly takes a step towards the water's edge at Chinaman's Beach. I didn't know we had a beach called Chinaman's Beach. Okay, sounds a little racist. Located in the affluent suburb of Mosman on the shores of Sydney Harbour, there's little to be afraid of. The waves are small and avoidable, the turquoise depths nicely buffered by a comfortable stretch of sandy shore to safely plant your feet. This was one of Paz's favourite places to swim. When she first moved to Australia from Chile in 2018, Paz quickly and eagerly adapted to Australia's beach lifestyle. Here you use the beach as part of your everyday life. I see people go to the beach in winter. There's no problem with that. It's just routine, she says. In Chile, it's not so common to be in touch with ocean life. Despite this, she developed a reverence for the octopus, pulpo, in Spanish, from a young age. I felt very, not scared, but, oh, we have to be careful with these animals, more than sharks or other kinds of creatures because they're very intelligent, Paz says. For this reason, she never wanted to have an encounter with an octopus. Paz stands hand in hand with her partner, Mauricio Quitape, their feet buried in the sand ankle deep. She dreams of going further, back into the water. I feel it will be soon, a moment in my life that I will return, but I don't think it will be like it used to. In March 2023, just as the summer heat was fading, Paz decided to take a quick dip at Chinaman's Beach with Mauricio right before she taught her usual Thursday Spanish class. She zipped up her swimsuit, adjusted her snorkel, and entered the glittery blue water. I submerged and I saw a shell. I picked it up and returned to the surface and looked at it. I checked the shell because the shells can have a crab in it or a snail. It was seemingly empty, so Paz placed the shell in the pocket of her swimsuit and continued swimming. The first pinch came when she was leaving the water. It wasn't painful, but it was kind of annoying. A second pinch. Paz checked her swimsuit and saw nothing. A third pinch. She then noticed a lump protruding underneath her swimsuit. She held the lump and unzipped for another check. It was an octopus with the full bright blue lines. Paz was aware it was a blue-ringed octopus as she'd recently watched a TikTok video about the dangerous animal, so it was pretty fresh. Mauricio quickly leapt into action. She turned towards me and said, "Take it off." I didn't think about it, I just followed instructions. Mauricio grabbed what he described as a spherical blob of bright yellow and blue in his fingertips, flicked it into the sand, and dialed 000. Which for you guys in America is 911. We have it 000, you have 911. The couple then managed to contain the octopus in a bottle with some water as they waited for the ambulance. The creature had turned brown with the sun and sand, and Paz was hopeful that maybe it wasn't what she thought it was. When the ambulance arrived, a paramedic flicked the bottle and the octopus again flashed blue. This was an emergency. Soon after the ambulance arrived, Paz began to feel a numbness around her mouth and tongue, like when you eat spicy food but without the spicy feeling. In the back of the ambulance, she was told to call her family. "I think that was a big red flag for me," Paz said. "I wasn't afraid, I think I disconnected. I was being very rational about it." In hospital, her respiratory strength, blood pressure, and heart rate were decreasing, but overall she was feeling okay. Being accompanied by the octopus, nicknamed Cuddles by hospital staff, made Paz something of a fascination during her stay. So many people came to visit and would take selfies with the octopus. I think that was the weirdest part. But it isn't surprising. The blue-ringed octopus is one of the many dangerous animals that Australians grow up fearing. Thankfully, however, very few of us ever actually interact with one. When Paz and Mauricio first told their families their plans to move to Australia, their loved ones were terrified for them over potential encounters with spiders and sharks. Paz reassured them, saying, "No worries, I'm not going to Queensland, a place she thought of as at home for a disproportionate number of the country's dangerous animals." Paz's apartment is decorated with photos of her travels around the world with Mauricio, their cat Uli, and who continues to be a great comfort to her following the octopus encounter. Finding herself belly to beak with one of Australia's most infamous critters still feels hard to believe, but she says it was what happened after the accident that surprised her the most. In the aftermath, she says two things surprised her: the media's response and the post-traumatic stress she now experiences, which has prevented her from making a swift return to the ocean and left her with a disgust for soft, fishy textures. "I was a big fan of ceviche, so when I visited Chile a couple months ago, my family were waiting with a huge pot, but Paz couldn't indulge." News of deadly crocodile or shark encounters, or box jellyfish stings in this case, blue-ringed octopus bites, tend to travel very fast in Australia, even making international headlines. It's not uncommon for bite victims to read articles or conversations online centered around their accident. Very interesting for me to read that because I'm also part of that discourse. I constantly talk about stuff like this. Paz says she was taken aback by what she saw. "I felt that it was kind of racist," she said, adding that people were commenting on whether the victim was a foreigner who didn't respect the wildlife. For Mauricio, this couldn't be further from the truth. Paz is the sort of person who can look at the most hideous animal and find those eyes a spark, he says. She sees our cat Uli's eyes in every other animal. It's alien to me, but something I admire in her. Look, I'm going to not read the rest of this article because it does get quite... Oh, there's a photo of a guy from Newcastle. Interesting. It talks a lot about the Bite Club, which we've talked about before, but that's basically the story. This Chilean woman was bitten by a blue-ringed octopus that she had put in her pocket accidentally, and the media reaction she felt was racist. So let's talk a little bit about that. When I first read this headline, I thought it was going to be another story of another person. I nearly called them a moron, but I'm trying to be non-judgmental. Another person who finds a blue ring octopus in a rock pool and picks it up with their hand. This isn't the case. Paz seems to be pretty well aware of what the wildlife in Australia can do, and pretty, not ignorant to the dangers of stuff like blue ring octopuses. She picked up a shell, put it in her pocket. A seemingly innocuous action that could have killed her. Now, there are going to be people who say, well, you shouldn't take shells. Leave nature as you see it. Take nothing but photos, leave nothing but footsteps. And sure, that's a great moral to live by, but listen, let's not throw the first stone. We've all taken a pretty shell from the beach. Everyone has, and it's not that big a deal. The only difference for this person is that shell contained a blue ring octopus, which is like 1,000,000 to 1 fluke. She even checked it because she thought there might be a snail or a crab in there. Turns out there was something a lot worse. And look, if you read the comments on any social media post or news post that's about someone who's a foreigner, there's always a little bit of racism there. So this woman has gone through a trauma of being, bitten by one of the most dangerous animals in Australia. It's true, we are raised to fear those animals. Any child in Australia is taught from a very early age, you be very careful in rock pools. Blue-ringed octopus, you do not touch them. They will fuck you up. They are one of the most venomous animals on the planet. They're cute, they're little, they're very majestic looking. Don't fucking touch them, okay? Paz obviously did it accidentally and nearly died. But yeah, the vitriol that this woman got online, I never read any of the comments, but I can only imagine. People are not very friendly, and people do like to victim blame. I thought from reading the headline that it was going to be an ignorant person who from a different country didn't understand, but I still have a soft spot for that person because they don't know. Unless you grow up in a place, you don't know everything. No one knows everything, okay? So like, if I were to visit like Madagascar, I'm sure there's some kind of weird crab or snail there that can kill me. I wouldn't know. I would just probably try not to pick it up, but you just don't know, okay? So you have to have a little bit of empathy for people. So this poor woman has had to endure a couple of traumas, and unfortunately it's left her not being able to enjoy her lifestyle, which is very, very sad. I will link this article in the description of this podcast, so you can go read the full thing. I recommend doing that. I'm just not going to read the whole thing because it is quite long. Okay. Moving on to the second story. A tiger has fatally attacked a zoo employee while he was cleaning the animal's cage, officials say. We love a good tiger attack, so let's read this. A zoo employee is dead after being fatally attacked by a tiger while he was cleaning an animal's cage, officials in Romania are reporting. City officials posted on social media that the attack took place in the morning hours of Monday in the city of Pitsesti, a city in south-central regions of Romania. A preliminary investigation by police revealed that the 52-year-old victim, an employee of Pitsesti Zoo, entered the tiger's cage without complying with safety protocols and was fatally attacked, according to the release. The employee, who had worked at the zoo since 2015, officials announced. It was the first such attack in 50 years at the zoo. Officials said an internal investigation is underway. The zoo activities have been suspended after the employee was fatally attacked. The city's mayor, Christian Gentia, shared thoughts with the victim's family in a post on his Facebook page, adding that he ordered a pause on activities in the zoo while an investigation is carried out. Witnesses told Romanian outlet Environmentele Ziliu, that's Romanian, I can't say it, the attack was extremely violent and a criminal case for manslaughter has been opened by local police. Zoo leaders and workers were deeply affected by the incident, officials wrote in a news release. This is a breaking story. This has been published today, so we will follow that up next week. But unfortunately, there's not much else to say here. I don't want to speculate on what happened. very minimal information, but yeah, just dot points. Zoo employee in Romania has been killed in a very violent attack from a tiger after trying to clean its cage and allegedly not following zoo safety protocols. So that is definitely one to be on the watch for. We have one more story, and then we're going to get to our grid. This is a crazy headline. Man leaps on polar bear to save wife from attack. I cannot wait to read this one. This is going to be great. This is from, I believe, Ontario. Okay. A man is recovering from serious injuries after leaping onto a polar bear to protect his wife from being mauled by the animal, according to police in Canada's Ontario province. A man and woman in the town of Fort Severn had left their home before 5 a.m. local time to look for their dogs, and while in the driveway, a polar bear lunged at the woman. The woman slipped to the ground as her husband leapt onto the animal to prevent its attack. The bear then attacked the male, causing serious but non-life-threatening injuries to his arms and legs. The man is expected to recover. While the man grappled with the animal, a neighbor arrived with a firearm and shot the bear several times. The bear retreated to a nearby wooded area where it died from its injuries. Police officers who arrived at the scene after receiving reports of gunfire and a possible bear sighting in the area located a deceased polar bear. The service said police continued to patrol the area to ensure that no other bears were roaming in the community. While polar bear sightings in the area are common, attacks are rare but not unheard of, a police spokesperson told CNN. Fort Severn is located near Hudson Bay. Polar bears around the bay prefer to hunt seals while out on the sea ice, but when the ice breaks up, which occurred earlier than usual in Hudson Bay this year, they head inland to search for food. Elsa McCall, Director of Conservation Outreach and a staff scientist of Polar Bears International, told CNN. At the time of the attack, maybe this bear was a little hungrier than usual, she added. McCall said changing sea patterns due to climate change could impact how far inland bears go throughout the year and recommended locking away waste in order not to attract them. If you're attacked by a polar bear, definitely do not play dead. That is a myth. Fight for as long as you can. I've always said that. We know the rhyme, okay? If it's black, fight back. If it's brown, lie down. If it's white, good night. As if, like, you have no chance against the polar bear. If you're attacked by a polar bear, like, just do your best. Like, you might as well fight. Why just give up? Like, that's just stupid. So, this person did a crazy thing and attacked on the back of a polar bear. It was to save his wife, and he succeeded, and the neighbor came by and shot it. I'll say this all the time. People think Australia is crazy. Like in that first story, that woman from Chile, her family was like, "No, don't move there. There's crocodile." But like, you know, that was a bad accent. It's not racist because it doesn't sound anything like any South American accent. But and I have lots of friends from Chile. They'll let me say that. But like, Australia is not that scary when you're living in a place like this where just a polar bear can attack you in your driveway. That's absolutely nuts. Fantastic. Great 3 stories there. We will follow up the tiger one because it seems like there is more information there to come. And yeah, of course, I'll link the story about the blue ring octopus because just even the webpage, even the way that this article is laid out is very beautiful. I don't know, do they do this for every story on ABC? It's very nice. Well done. Okay, let's get to one of my favorite parts of the show. It's the grid. Hooray! Play the music. You guys know all about the grid at this point. We have a grid with 9 slots on it, and I have a wheel with 100 animals on it, and the goal is to cross off each of these slots. I only get 3 skips, so we've been doing this for a couple months now. I shouldn't have to explain the rules. Go back and listen to another episode if you like, but we do have a new grid. Last episode, we were very successful. We beat the 3x3 grid. We also beat the 4x4 grid over on the Patreon, which, by the way, you should go to do the Patreon because we have a video version of a 4x4 grid all the time. It's going to be really good. So, new grid, new categories. I'm going to read them out for you. In the top left corner, we have an animal that appears in Red Dead Redemption 2, the video game. At the top center, we have an animal who has been the focus of a creature feature or a man-eater movie. So, for example, if I got a shark, I could put it down because there's Jaws. You see how that works? The next category in the top right, one that I'm a little bit worried about, is an animal whose name starts with a vowel, A, E, I, O, or U. In the center row, on the left, we have an animal that humans eat. So something like a pig or a sheep or even a kangaroo, but it has to be animals that humans eat regularly, because like we could all eat like a gecko, but I don't think anywhere like gecko is like a food that people constantly eat. Like it's got to be an animal that like a lot of people eat a lot of the time. Okay, like squirrel, people eat squirrels all the time, but people don't eat like what's another example, like owls. People don't really eat owls, okay, but we eat chickens. The next category, man-eater. That's always going to be there on every single grid. An animal that can kill and eat humans. The next category is an animal that lives in the desert. The next category on the bottom row, an animal that can swim. Then we have an animal that has fur, and we have an animal that humans farm. And it could be farmed for any reason. It could be for food or for skin or for any other reason. That's doing it. So we've got 3 slots. Let's give it a spin. Let's go. I've missed this, guys. I've missed the grid. We're going to hit the gritty. First animal, straight up, is a bee. I thought it was going to be the saltwater crocodile. We just missed it. We've got a bee. Okay. We do farm bees, but we don't eat them. We eat the honey. So I could go farmed. I could also potentially go man-eater movie, because I know there's a man-eater movie about bees, but let's go farmed. That feels good. Okay. I'm only going to go that because I can't remember what the bee... Oh, I could have gone bee movie, maybe. Would that count? Damn it. Starfish. Technically, starfish can swim, so I'm going to go there. Starfish for swimming. The one I'm worried about is the vowels. That's going to be tricky. We have an emu. Well, that cleared it up. We're going to go emu for starts with a vowel. Could we get through this in the first week? That would be delightful. I'd love that. The next animal is a house cat. We do not generally eat house cats. They're not man-eaters. They don't really live in the desert. They have fur though, but they also appear in Red Dead Redemption 2. So I'm going to go house cat for Red Dead Redemption 2. 4 slots down, all 4 corners down actually. By the way, you can go and look at our Instagram. It's the first post there. It has a picture of the grid, so you can play along while we're doing this. The next animal is a boar. We could go for a few things here. I'm going to go man-eater movie because of the Australian movie Razorback. Perfect. Could have gone in pretty much all those other slots, actually. We next have a swan. Humans don't really eat swans. They're not really in the desert. They're not man-eaters, and they don't have fur. That's going to be our first skip. That's okay. We've got 2 skips left, 4 categories left. I think we're doing okay. Next animal, spider. Okay. Spiders, some spiders definitely do live in the desert, so we're going to go desert. We need an animal that humans eat, a man-eater, and an animal with fur. We have the stingray. People do eat stingrays, but I wouldn't say that it's like common. Like you can catch stingrays and cook them and eat them, but it's not like a fish. You know what I mean? People eat fish all the time. That's going to be another skip. They can kill people, but they rarely do it. They don't eat people. They don't have fur. That's a second skip. Okay. Now I'm starting to worry a little bit. We've still got a skip left. Next animal is a kangaroo. I'm going to use that for humans eat, because humans do eat kangaroos. In Australia, you can get it at Woolworths down at the grocery store, and it's quite delicious actually. Don't eat kangaroo very much because it's quite gamey, and to be honest, it doesn't taste as good as beef or pork, but it is good. My uncle hunts kangaroo actually, and occasionally will give us a little bit of it. Kangaroo tail is really good for dogs too. They really like that. The next animal is a tiger. Well, that's perfect. We've got man-eater or fur. We're going to go man-eater. So we have 1 category left. It's fur. And we have 1 skip left. So this feels pretty good. I think we might get it. The next animal is a naked mole rat. One of the only mammals on Earth that would not count as having fur. God damn it. Okay. Wow. That's humorous. Okay. 1 roll left. No more skips. We've got to get an animal with fur. I was going to say before that came up, any mammal will do, but that's the one where it really won't count. Literally in the name, it's naked. It does not have fur. The next animal is a puma. My friends, puma / cougar / mountain lion has fur, and therefore we have beat this grid in week 1. Hoorah! That means next week we're going to have a brand new grid. Very excited for it. Maybe we'll just do a whole episode of grids. No, we won't do that. I don't think that would be that exciting. But if you do like the grids, guys, you can head over to our Patreon, patreon.com/maneaters. We do a new grid video there every week, pretty much. Although I have taken a little bit of a break recently. Of course, that is the end of our episode, guys. Visit our website, www.maneaterspod.com, for your merchandise. Had a few people come through and make some orders for Christmas. Very, very nice. Thank you for that. I try to keep things there as cheap as possible. It's really not for me to make money. It's just for you to, buy a shirt, and I get like a couple bucks. So do it if you can. I really appreciate it. Go to the Patreon, support us if you can. It's Christmas. I'm poor. I would like some money. I'm e-begging now. That's going to do it for our episode. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for your patience while I've been away for a little bit. And just thank you for being around. We've got a couple more episodes this year. We have the first annual Chompy Awards next week. Very excited for that. I'm going to wear a tuxedo. I actually have an awards ceremony tomorrow I'm going to. Got the, it's like the 75th Condor Awards or something like that as the drama awards in the city that I live. I'm actually nominated this year. I'm nominated for Best Actor in a Musical in a Leading Role, which is crazy. I'm nominated for School of Rock, which I did earlier this year. So fingers crossed. I'm sure I will not win. It'll be the chick who played Mary Poppins, but that is great because she's a beautiful soul. All right, guys, that is going to be it for today. Have a fantastic rest of your week. I love your faces, and stay golden, pony boys. That's not the sign off. Stay safe out there, because as we've learned, it's a jungle out there. Hoorah! Yar!